We have a new bell. That's Sal's bell. Welcome everyone to meeting number 5,345. Thank you to the executive chefs for being the greeting line today and for all the wonderful food you guys create, and to Bert too. I'd love to have you come up and introduce your guests at the microphone. Please come on up and bring the guest. We'll start out with Morris Chubb.
Good afternoon, President Steve. Tony? Oh, there you are. Tony Kim, I can remember his last name now. Tony Kim is back for the third time, I think it is, and considering membership.
Tony, you have been to more meetings during my year than about 90% of our members. So I want to thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Welcome. Again, thank you, Morris. Sal, you coming up? Hi, Steve.
I'd like to introduce my guest today, my wife, Kathy Prouty.
Kathy, the most patient person in town. Thanks, Kathy. Sal.
Steve, thanks for the bell. I like it. I'd like to introduce, I have three guests today. My mom, Eva, my stepdad, Charlie, and my dad, Chava, who are all here to see what I say. They want to know about my life.
Yeah, so do we all. Welcome. Must be very proud parents. We all love Sal. Don't we, everyone? Yeah. Rod Diridon is going to come up and talk about our friend Norm Mckenna, whom we lost recently. You probably all know Rod's been friends with Norm, I'm going to guess, for 50 years, or maybe even more than that. So Rod Diridon.
Norman Yoshio Mckenna was my friend. That statement is being shared proudly throughout our valley and the world. He was indeed the most impactful person in the history of San Jose. His parents came to America in 1902 in the same massive immigration as the Italians, the Irish, the Portuguese, and so many more. They worked hard and found success. Norm grew up with four brothers and a sister in a usual American family, studying, playing baseball, dreaming of the future. The Pearl Harbor backlash sent most of the Japanese Americans to the internment camps. Norm in 1942 to Hartz Mountain in the Wyoming high desert. The young men of the military age were allowed to enlist and become involved in the 442nd Rainbow Division, which amassed more honors for bravery than any unit in World War II. In the camps, the parents tried to maintain normalcy, and Norm has many great stories about scouting and pranks played on others by the boy who later became Senator Alan Prince Simpson.
Welcome to Zoom.
A cross-party ally.
Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
After the war, Norm returned
You have not
home,
entered any
completed
numbers.
high school,
Please re-enter
San
your
Jose
meeting
High,
ID
was
followed by
student body
pound.
president, point guard on the basketball team, and completed UC Berkeley.
Any numbers.
He served
Please
his
re-enter
Army
your meeting
ROTC
ID
commission
followed by pound.
as an intelligence officer in Korea.
Goodbye.
After the war, Norm returned home, completed, returning home, he began working at his father's insurance company and was persuaded by the Japanese and Italian communities to seek political office. The old kingmakers at the time, led by Dutch Hammond, got him appointed to the Human Relations Commission, and in 1968, wonderful, thoughtful Mayor Ron James passed the San Jose Rotary president and our current senior member, decided not to run for re-election, and he and others proposed Norm, who became mayor in 1972. Longtime Republican Congress member Charlie Goopser was becoming a bit more senior. Some say he saw the Mckenna writing on the wall, and he chose not to run for re-election, allowing Norm to run successfully for Congress in 1974 against then Assembly member George Milius. The early 1970s saw an almost total conversion from the farming and rural control in politics to the beginning of the democratic-leaning environmental and social programs of Silicon Valley. Norm was in the vanguard of that shift and thrived in Washington. Norm chaired Congress's 1974 Watergate class of 78 new Congress members, all Democrats, was often able to keep them together in a voting bloc, which gave him an inordinate power as a young legislator. He became a whip, only 5 whips in Congress, and they control how their party is going to vote. He had several choice committee assignments, began providing important leadership, and by the early 1990s, he had authored or helped pass several landmark issues, such as having the president apologize for the World War II Japanese American internments and pay reparations to the survivors. He chaired the Surface Transportation Committee and authored the landmark Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act, ICE-T, for the first time invested gas tax funds into the local mass transportation programs. That has continued, and our valley has benefited greatly from that and related measures. ICE-T also created the Mckenna Transportation Institute, now one of the largest transportation policy centers in the world. And thank you, Karen. Then Reagan was elected, and the Democrats lost the Congress, leaving Norm without leadership role. Lockheed offered him a presidency of their new automated bridge toll company, and he accepted, leading to half dozen years in the private sector. But Bill Clinton tabbed him to be Secretary of Commerce, and then before he could even catch his breath, George Bush brought him into his administration as Secretary of Transportation, a role perfectly suited for Norm. He held that seat through the first and part of Bush's second term, longer than any of the Secretary of Transportation in history. And Norm's impact was transformative. Most noteworthy was his leadership of the response to the 9/11 attack and standing up for the Homeland Security Administration. For that lifetime of exemplary service, Norm has received the highest honors possible from our country and several others, most especially from Japan. He then became president of Hill & Knowlton, the nation's largest PR firm, and was later involved in advising the most important clients in the nation, most often on transportation issues. Norm and Denny and sons David and Stuart have lived a busy and happy life. During the past 30 or so years, their home in Edgewater, Maryland, about 4 miles north of Annapolis, has been the East Coast crash pad for the Mckenna clan. Recently, Norm has some medical issues, and I think we all were aware of those. But he faced them with his usual stoic and ever-jovial demeanor until May 3rd, when his extended family was all around him, and he caught his last train back to his maker. He shared with each one of us many times his many thoughtful little jokes about his dad naming him after an airport, and he and I have always argued that neither will win about whether it's better to have an airport or a train station named after you. And I'm not going to go through that litany again. This is a more somber time. His national memorial will be on June 11th at 10:30 a.m. East Coast time. And the San Jose tribute is being planned on the afternoon of June 16th at a large venue in the downtown area that will be announced. Both of those will be televised. Indeed, my brothers and sisters in Rotary, Norm Mckenna was my friend.
Let's have 15 seconds of silence for Norm. Thank you. Brian has to fix something related to the slideshow. It'll just take him a little while. And next up is Steve Prouty telling the story about his Rotary moment. Steve, you can start with this mic and then switch to the other.
Thanks. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Can I switch to that mic? Raise your hands if you've ever taken one of those DNA tests that's available on the market. About 5 years ago, Kathy and I ordered DNA tests from Ancestry.com, primarily because we were curious about our ethnic backgrounds. But that's about as far as we got into it. I assume a lot of you had the same reasons for yours. Then a little over 3 years ago, Kathy and I each took the DNA tests offered by 23andMe, this time because we wanted to find out what our genetically based health risks were. In between those tests, we had a speaker here at Club, Bill Griffith, who spoke about a book he had written called The Stranger in My Genes. During his presentation, he shared how he found out that the father he grew up with was not his birth father, and that was after taking a DNA test. After getting back our 23andMe test results, Kathy and I started looking through our individual DNA connections, and I found that one of my sister's 2 daughters had taken the test, and they showed up as first cousins. While at the same time, Kathy looked through her list, found one of her sister's sons, and he showed up as her nephew. And so I said to her, I go, how come Eric shows up as your nephew, but my nieces show up as first cousins? So then I said, how much DNA do you share with Eric? I was just starting to learn how this stuff worked. And she said 25%. And I looked at my nieces and they go, I only share 12% with them. At that point, I knew how Bill Griffith must have felt. I told Kathy, I don't think Don Prouty was my father. Since both my mom and dad had already passed away, I had no one to go to get answers. I hadn't logged into Ancestry for about a year, but the next day I logged in and I hit the button to find my DNA matches. And the very top entry had a man's name, John Drake, followed by the statement that with a 95% degree of probability, John Drake is your father. Oy vey. The section right below that listed my siblings who had taken tests, amongst them was a woman named Kim Lundy. So now I had a newly found father and half-sister. I yelled to Kathy to come and see what I had just discovered, and we were both blown away. It didn't take us long to search the internet, and an obituary of a woman who had recently passed away said that she'd been survived by her husband, John Drake, her 2 adult children, and her 2 stepchildren, Kim Lundy and Brent Drake. So with some further investigation, I was able to locate Brent Drake, and I sent him an email letting him know that I thought I was possibly his half-brother. After a couple of days, Brent connected me with John, who was 92 at the time. John said he remembered my mom, as brief as their courtship was, and he said he trusted science, and if a DNA test said that he was my father, he believed it. Since having spoken with John that night, I try to call him most weeks. Kathy and I, our kids and our grandkids have been up to visit him. I've traveled to Washington a couple of times on my own to see him. And tomorrow I'm flying back up to visit him and my brother in East Wenatchee. John is now 95. He retired a number of years ago as the superintendent of schools in a school district near Washington, Vancouver, Washington. He's in great shape mentally and physically, and he lives in a retirement home about 3 miles from my brother, Brent. Thank you for letting me share my Rotary moment.
A few years ago, when the last member of my parents' generation had died, and we were going to have a memorial in Southern California, and one of my cousins said, "Hey, we have a new cousin," and I was 65 at the time. I said, "What do you mean we have a new cousin?" She goes, "Yeah, through ancestry, blah blah blah. We found out we've got a new cousin," and so this woman, my new cousin, she gave us a gift to her father on his 90th birthday that let's both do genetic testing. What do you say, Dad? So it came back and they had no common genetic material whatsoever. So she knew that he wasn't her father. Needless to say, she never told him, and then he died shortly thereafter. But so in her investigation, she kept coming Borkenhagen, 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 all these Borkenhagen connections. And so, as it turns out, her father was actually one of my uncles. But the funniest part of the story is that Taryn, my girlfriend, and I went to this service, and Taryn hadn't met very many of these people. And so she said, "Well, how will I know who your new cousin is?" And I said, I don't know how I'm going to know who the new cousin is. So we walked in, and Taryn says, "Steve, I know who your new cousin is." And I said, "How do you know?" She goes, "That woman is you wearing a skirt." And she was right. Andrew Bales, come on up. After many decades with all of us being one of the most important people in our arts community, Andrew is going to be leaving the symphony soon and moving on to greener pastures in Europe. And my friend, Andrew Bales.
Thank you. And I feel after those last two that I have no mother, I have no father, and I don't want to know anymore. It's been intimidating to speak about oneself in this context, so forgive me the hubris of doing so. You have to blame Steve because he asked me to do it. Many of you have heard I've been replaced. Robert Massey is on his way to San Jose and has become the next general director of Symphony San Jose. I expect to invite him to Rotary upon his arrival. In the spirit of some of the earlier, the Rotary moments, I recall, for me, a Rotary moment would have been when Carl Salas arrived in my living room. He sat in my living room, invited me to take an exchange student in. Her future in the program was not guaranteed. Her first home had not been a terrible success, and she was on the cusp of being sent back to Germany. But I sat there and heard her story and invited her into our family, and Jules became a very successful exchange student through Rotary and very much a lifelong granddaughter for me. So I remember that, and it really made a connection. I came to San Jose with Cleveland Ballet for 5 Nutcracker performances in 1985. The ballet co-venture between San Jose and Cleveland was formed the following January, and I was asked to run both Cleveland and San Jose. And San Jose was a startup. The need to be here on a moment's notice for the opportunity to see Woz or somebody else was sort of a perpetual call to action. In those days, I would start my day on a morning flight from Cleveland to San Jose, have meetings here, and take a red eye back that night. As that happened as often as 3 times a week in that startup year, I generated 1 million miles and got a letter from United Airlines telling me I was the #1 customer on the San Jose to Cleveland flight there. I don't think they ever should have written that letter. In the second year, I moved my base here to San Jose. as I could schedule a more predictable plan to go back to Cleveland, and that made more sense in the long run. But what really made the more sense is I met the love of my life here, and her father's health was such that we were never going to move anywhere. So this became home, and we've now made our home here for 35 years. I worked for a number of ventures, all in the arts. Once the ballet was established, I did a number of other things. I helped found the Office of Cultural Affairs for the city of San Jose. I built a Veterans Memorial here. I was a founding board member of Team San Jose. I went back to the ballet and ran them, and then 20 years ago, I founded Symphony San Jose, then under the name Symphony Silicon Valley. I have met, I was about to read you the same paragraph. You didn't want to hear it again. It's been my home, and I've relished my role in the arts and the community here. Jennifer came to me a few years ago, and she asked, as I was sitting at the office in Symphony, if I planned to die in that chair. Thought it a bit, and I said, well, I think my answer was could be. I like what I do. But she had bigger plans and suggested that we should plan one more big grand adventure for ourselves. And thereupon was born what will now become a plan for us to retire in Portugal, take our weather with us, and explore new destinations while we still can. The pandemic slowed the start of that by a couple of years, but we're now on a glide path to make it happen, and the next few months that will take place. San Jose has been very good to me and to the artists that I've chosen to support and work with. I wish only the best for what comes next, for all of you, for the city, for its arts community. As you all know, it isn't easy being in the shadow of a city with the cultural heritage of San Francisco. But San Jose is a fine place to live, work, and make music. Parting offering that I'm hoping to do, and looks promising, is that we'll return to San Jose State this Labor Day for another pair of free concerts for the community. It's yeah. It'll be the last program I program for the symphony. I programmed the season they're about to do, but it'll be a dual purpose because it'll also introduce Robert Massey to the community. I hope you will all give him support, welcome him, bring him into the club and into the community in a big way. And I thank you all, and I thank everybody here for what Rotary does. It's been a great pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll be sharing his home address and phone number in Portugal with all of you soon, and I know he'll appreciate guests. Matt Bell is going to come up and talk about membership.
Good afternoon, everybody. And just, Andrew, thank you for your incredible service to our city and to our club. Amazing. I love coming up here and giving these updates, and we talk a lot about numbers and how many new members and all those things, but at the end of the day, it's about the actual members and the people and the impact that they have. So, I mean, what a great model that we have in Andrew. So just a quick update. Where are we on our goals? So at the beginning of the year, we started with 431 members. As of just this last meeting, we're at 426. So, we have some attrition and we're building our way back and trying to get to our goal of achieving break even at 431. I got to tell you, we're within striking distance with just 5 new members. I know there's some new applications coming in, and we've got some great opportunities to share Rotary with potential new members with the spring barbecue coming up, a number of how many meetings left, Stevie, until you're done here? Just a few, right? So let's keep pushing hard, and again, a great opportunity to invite people to the barbecue if you can. We need 5 more, but let's not stop there and just keep going and keep identifying and bringing in and sharing Rotary with amazing people like Andrew, as well as I'd like to just do a quick profile of our Red Badger, Mark Mckenna. keeping on this theme of impact of new members to our club. Since joining back, I think early last fall, I mean, Mark has really been on a tear. And I'll just say, if you're feeling a little bit, I don't know, insecure or bad about your level of involvement in Rotary, you may want to plug your ears for the next couple of minutes. But Mark's been incredible. So on the Red Badge Committee, just quickly, some of the things, if I talk all, if I mentioned all of them, we'd be here for the whole time. He has been very active on the Red Badge Committee, both at the barbecues, led putting on the skit for the Christmas lunch, worked on, most recently, the Animal Assisted Happiness Project for the spring. He is a big part of the Climate Action Committee and initiated the Carbon Offset Project. He's a team leader for the Go Green Team Project. It goes on and on. He's chairing a couple, I think the Climate Action Committee this next year, I hope that's right, as well as another. So really just involved. He also worked closely with Steve when Steve asked for people to help create a refugee support committee for refugees from Afghanistan. Of course, Mark stepped up and he's been leading that as well. He's joined the ELC, although we haven't been able to have ELC. He will be a part of that once that happens. So it goes on. And I just want to just really recognize Mark's efforts and thank Mike Conniff, his sponsor, for introducing him to our club. But Mark, can you come up and just say just a couple of words about your experience thus far in Rotary? How about a hand for Mark?
So just quickly, thank you all. It's written, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose. And my sponsor, Mike Conniff, a great recruiter for Rotary, if there ever was one, had for more than a decade been urging me to join Rotary. And then last summer, we were having dinner with Mike, my wife and I, Carol, with Mike and Ann, and we were talking about what we've been doing, and I mentioned that I recently retired and what was going on, and he said, Mike asked, have you thought about Rotary? What about now? Sometimes that's all it takes, just to ask the question when the time is right. When I joined Rotary, one of the issues I really cared about was climate change. So joining the Rotary Climate Action Committee was an obvious place to start. Everything else that Matt talked about, that's just been serendipity. So two things I've learned so far in my very short time at Rotary. First, there's no right way to be a Rotarian. Do what works for you. And to those of you who contribute so much to the club while holding down full-time jobs and often raising families at the same time, my hat's off to you. I don't know how you do it. You are the true Rotary heroes. Second, it never hurts to say yes. I'm grateful to Mike for his encouragement and to Kathleen Thomas and Mauricio Cordova for the leadership of the Red Badge Committee. Thank you very much. And Pat.
Thanks, everyone. As always, when you're thinking about what kind of, what does a new member look like? What is the ideal new member? Just like that. Thank you very much.
I am here to talk about the barbecue. June 8th, and we want to get 400 people to say goodbye to my buddy Stevie. Actually, it's not just for Steve, but it is going to be his last big event. And for those who haven't been to the barbecue, please come and experience what Rotary is truly all about. We have so much fun. Our committee, the boys in the back, we work so hard to make this perfect. The food part of it, we'll bring the wagon, we're going to have great wine, we're going to have everything. And this year, in the old days, we used to have a lot of fun. So this year we're going to have fun. We're going to bring back a dunk tank, but there'll only be one person in the dunk tank. Clothing optional, so come and see us.
Thank you, Bert. Reminder, Mini Masters is happening this week on Saturday. This is a Bryan Adams bobblehead. And if you play well, you can win the Bryan Adams bobblehead. It's at Emerald Hills Golfland. That starts at 10 a.m. on May 21st, and you can sign up today after the meeting. Please sign up. It'll be a lot of fun, and the committee's done a lot of work on that. So Sal Pizarro, come on up. And if there's anyone in the club who needs no introduction, it's Sal Pizarro.
Thank you for that amazingly brief introduction, Steve. I appreciate that. First, let me start off by apologizing to those few of you who came here today or watching on Zoom who are really hoping to hear about all my big plans for next year, because they're not fully baked yet, and there will be a lot of time to talk about that in July. But I think you should be able to get some sense of what kind of president I may be from my words today. You know, I was joking with someone earlier that this is kind of an audition, but it's too late. You can't get rid of me. It's happening in 6 weeks, whether I want it to or not. I did ask my 10-year-old son, our 10-year-old son, Alex, he's yours too. We don't even need DNA to prove that. What I should tell you about myself today, and Alex is a smart kid, and he thought about it, and he said, you should tell them that you love Mardi Gras and James Bond, and that you're 50. So I'm 50. That one's pretty easy, and the other two we'll get to. And instead of just showing you a bunch of pictures of myself as a kid and growing up, I thought it might be more interesting to frame what I'm going to talk about around places that I've lived. And also, I really hate showing pictures of myself to other people, so that got me out of that. So let me show you a map of all the places around the world that I have lived in my 50 years. Yes. It's true, they're all basically around San Jose. And if this is a shock to you, then you haven't known me for very long. So the important thing to me, though, isn't where I've gone, but that each of these 10 places has contributed to me becoming the person I am today. So my story begins here at 3221 East Hills Drive in East San Jose, just off White Road and Alum Rock Avenue. This is where my parents brought me home from San Jose Hospital in October of 1971. And I got to tell you, I don't have any real memories of this house. I was really young. I know that it was green when we lived there. It's not green now. This is a very recent picture. I also know that we didn't have sidewalks, and we just had gravel, and there's sidewalks there now, so that's an improvement. But I do know that I went to Horace Puritan Elementary School, right across the street from Joseph George Middle School, and that my grandmother and some aunts and uncles did live nearby. Now, my parents got divorced a few years later, which wasn't that uncommon in the 70s, and my mom got married to Charlie, my stepdad, and they've all been really good friends and continue to be so, and I am deeply appreciative of that because I know it's a very rare and wonderful thing, and it's been awesome for their grandkids to be able to have them all together. A final note about this house is that I don't remember a lot about the kids I hung around with then, except that there was another kid named Sal. And unlike my beautiful form of today, I was skinny as a rail back then, and I guess he was not. So I was Sal, and he was Fat Sal. I was Sal, he was Fat Sal. And I'm just willing to bet that nobody was happier when we moved away than Fat Sal, because he got to go back to just being Sal. And Alex at this point would say, and now you get to be Fat Sal. So my mom remarried, and we moved into this house on Lee Avenue, just literally steps away from San Jose's border with Los Gatos. Again, I don't remember much about this house, but at least it had sidewalks. But there is one fun, good story from this house that I want to share. Around February of 1980, and many of you look too young in the room to remember those days, my mom and stepdad took me to see John Carpenter's The Fog. Now, I probably asked to go see this movie, but I was 8. And that movie scared the shit out of me. We came home from the movie, and my mom, my stepdad were getting dinner ready, and they asked me to get a bottle of soda from our extra refrigerator. Now, the extra refrigerator was in a spare room, an add-on room, and the only thing about it, no problem, sure, I can go get that. But this room, you had to go down a few steps to turn on the light, and it was pitch dark, and I'd just seen the fog, and I was not going to go down those steps. And I said no. And this turned into a battle of wills between my parents and I that resulted in me going to my room without dinner and not being allowed to see the premiere of Battlestar Galactica 1980, which I'd really been looking forward to seeing. And this might tell you a little bit about how stubborn I may be on some issues as president, those of you who are willing to, test me on it. To this day, I have never seen an episode of Battlestar Galactica 1980 because I was like, fine, I will take your punishment. And this is how it's going to be. So we move on from that, though, and happily so. And our family of 3 in 1980 moved to this house on Ellerbrook Way in South San Jose. And that's where my mom and stepdad actually still live. And that was just this picture I took over the weekend. I stopped by to say hello and said, yes, I'm taking a picture in front of your house. Take the political sign out of your yard. I don't want people knowing who you're voting for. It's going to get me in trouble. Now, I'm Mexican by ethnicity, if you didn't know. Some people think I'm Italian. I'm not. There's a little bit of Irish in there on my mom's side. But in this house, it's fair to say I grew up as a white kid in the suburbs, okay? My house was like, my life was like a John Hughes movie back then. I was in the Cub Scouts. My friends and I would go hang out at Oak Ridge Mall. We would go to movies at the Century Theaters. We'd go have burgers at Denny's or Bob's Big Boy. We rode our bikes to middle school. Eventually, when I was going to San Francisco High School, some of them got cars, not me. I didn't get a car back then, but they did. And it was in this house. I've got lots of fond memories in this house. This is where I saw the Dodgers beat the A's in the 1988 World Series. And I was still living here a year later when the Loma Prieta earthquake hit in 1989. But I was actually working at a video store in Willow Glen when the earthquake happened. But the house wasn't too badly damaged. But let's go back to that Dodgers thing, because you guys had a nice reaction to it. So it's true. I'm a Dodgers fan, and I was born in San Jose. And the easy explanation for that is I'm a Dodgers fan because my dad, Chava, is a Dodgers fan, and he raised me to be a Dodgers fan in the 1970s. Now, he's from Los Angeles, although the Dodgers didn't move there until he moved to San Jose, so that's a whole other complicated thing, but trust me, that's how it happened. And growing up as a Dodgers fan in the 70s and 80s was actually pretty good. I mean, these are the days of Steve Garvey and Davey Lopes and Ron Say, and we had Fernando Mania that happened. And, the Giants actually kind of sucked back then, if you really remember. And I didn't know there was anything wrong with being a Dodgers fan in the Bay Area until I was like in 6th or 7th grade, and by then it was just too late. So, I have managed to pass on this affliction to my kids and to Amy, who is from New Mexico, so she had no baseball loyalties. It was very easy, be a Dodgers fan. Nobody will care. So we root for the Dodgers at home. We root for the A's when they're not playing the Dodgers. And we even root for the Giants, the San Jose Giants. Put San Jose in front of the name, I will root for them. And we don't need to get into football, but go Rams. So this is my first apartment at the Blossom Oaks Apartments in South San Jose. It's about 10 minutes where my parents live. Our apartment was not the one you can see at the balcony, but on the other side of the stairway. People didn't want me going inside and taking pictures of their house. I don't know. It was very strange. I lived here when I was going to San Jose State with a guy named Mike Gersh, who I went to high school with. He was a few years older than me, and he worked at the Mercury News in the sports department, and he got me my first job there in 1989 as a clerk in the sports department, which was just as glamorous as it sounds. I got to work from 4 p.m. to midnight, 4 days a week, including weekends. So that's real fun for a college student. We lived here until 1991 when Mike got married and I left San Jose. I was best man at Mike's wedding, and in some fun twists, He was later the sports editor at the Mercury News, so he was the boss of both me and Amy, and he officiated our wedding. So lots of Micro's connections in there. Now, for those of you who remember San Jose in the late 80s, it was not nearly as fun as it is now, and that is saying something. So I wasn't having the college experience that my friends were having at places like UCLA and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I knew this because we would write letters to each other. That's what we did back then because, of course, there was no email, and they would tell me about their dorms and their giant lecture halls and horrible food and having fun with their friends, and I thought, I go to school and go to work and then go to sleep and then wake up and go to school and go to work and go to sleep. So I made a switch and left San Jose State for UC Santa Barbara, and quite frankly, that was just like the best call I could have made. I lived in a private dorm called Francisco Torres during my junior year. It's really fun when you're there on your first night in the dorm and your RA, who's a sophomore, says, okay, so who's buying the beer tonight? And then the senior year, I shared an apartment with 5 other people. Most of them worked for the college paper, the Daily Nexus, as I did. And we had 5 people in a 3-bedroom apartment, and we were Mexican, a Chinese guy named Stuart Chin, a gay man named Mike Schmidt, 2 women, and 1 straight white male. And so if you know anything about UC Santa Barbara, that was like the most diverse household in the entire place. So I spent 2 years in Santa Barbara. I took a class on Ernest Hemingway. I worked at the college paper. I developed a taste for Dewar Scotch, which had something to do with both working for the paper and taking a class on Hemingway. And somehow I got a degree in political science. People talk a lot about their spiritual homes, and Santa Barbara is definitely mine. I often tell people that I'll never move from San Jose, but if I ever do, you will find me here. So after graduation, though, in 1993, it was back to San Jose with me. I lived at home for a year, and then I moved into an apartment in the place you can see on the left, Mansion Grove Apartments in Santa Clara. It's really close to Levi Stadium now, so if I was still living there, that'd be interesting. I shared that apartment with another high school friend named Rich Bravo. He just recently retired from the San Jose Police Force, so that makes me realize, oh, we were so young then, and we're so not young now. And I also went back to the Mercury News. I got my job back in the sports department, where I started writing high school sports stories. I eventually became a copy editor, and then I was put in charge of all of our high school sports coverage. And by that time, Rich and I had amicably parted ways. He decided to move to Hollister, and I moved into the apartment you see on the right. That's the actual apartment at the Skyway Terrace complex on like Snell and Branham. It's actually Snell and Skyway, but close to Snell and Branham. And back in South San Jose once again. So you can see like South San Jose keeps tugging at me. Now here I was, a guy in his mid-20s, living by himself with no wife or kids, barely had any girlfriends, and a pretty good income for my age. So naturally, I developed an addiction to buying comic books. It started off, just as something fun I would do whenever I was near a comic book store, and in the 90s, everywhere. But pretty soon, it turned into a regular thing. Now, new comics are released on Wednesdays, so every week, I would pick up a stack of comic books around lunchtime. This is before I spent lunch with all of you fine people on Wednesdays, and then I would go someplace and read my comics and eat lunch. So when Amy and I started dating, she knew I had this thing that I did on Wednesdays that she didn't know about every week, like clockwork. Oh, we can't do that on Wednesday. I got to think. She thought I was like volunteering at an old folks home or something. And then she found out what it was, and she thought it was really funny. Now she has a garage filled with 5,000 comic books. She's not laughing so much anymore about it. So in 1998, I finally made the big move to downtown San Jose, occupying the upstairs apartment in front of this cute little building on North 3rd Street. Now the apartment itself was like really small. It was like a junior 1-bedroom. There was no door between the bedroom and the living room, just like a space, and the walls were paper thin, so I couldn't even have people over after I got off work, or they would just start banging on the walls. But I didn't care. I was living in downtown San Jose during the dot-com boom, and it was amazing. There was like such vibrancy on the streets. I spent most of this time working as a copy editor, so I was working at night. So I'd get off work at like 11:30 with my work friends, and we would go downtown and hit bars like Katie Bloom's and Mission Ale House and the Flying Pig Pub, which was my personal bar. And then I would just stagger on home at 2 a.m. because that was the life of, living downtown in your 20s. And during this time is also when I caught the Mardi Gras spirit, so Alex knows I'm taking care of that part. Joel Wyrick, for those of you who know him, started a block party on Post Street around Wade Smokehouse and Saloon. The barbecue joint he owned was a Mardi Gras party, very small and subtle at first. It got very out of hand in later years, very, very out of hand. But I have a lot of fond memories of those first couple of years, and it was because of that, in October of 2020, or October 2000, I took a road trip to New Orleans from San Jose. And that included a 6-day stop in Austin, Texas, where my car broke down, and on the way back. And all I could say is, if your car's going to break down anywhere in Texas, let it be Austin. But, I've had a bit of a love affair with New Orleans ever since then. I went several times after that trip until Hurricane Katrina. Amy and I, either together or separately, have been back a few times since then. We've taken the kids, at least one of them, 1.5 kind of, she was pregnant. And we hope to bring them back again soon, probably in 2023 after I'm done with this whole. But we I've never been there on Mardi Gras, but we celebrate Fat Tuesday at home. I make jambalaya, I make beignet for the kids for breakfast. I whip up some Sazeracs or Hurricanes whenever the mood strikes me. And I've also got a bag full of beads from my visits there. And let me tell you, I earned those beads the old-fashioned way. I bought them on Bourbon Street. So in late 2001, I bought a 1-bedroom condo at a brand new complex called The Plaza on 1st and Julian Streets, overlooking Trials Pub and Keskies, Germania, because remember, being close to bars is very important to me at that time. I was able to do this at the tender age of 30 because I saved up enough money. I didn't blow it all on comic books and beer. And there was also a great first-time home buyers program offered by the city of San Jose that may not exist anymore, but it was really helpful at the time. So this became my grown-up place. This is where I started hosting grown-up cocktail parties for my coworkers, where in my little 700 square foot condo, like 60 people would show up because I didn't care, just like, come on. I'd put up posters at work and people would just show up. This is also where I was living when I met the amazing Amy Brockett, who was this sports copy editor and page designer who I fell in love with, and eventually she fell in love with me, so I got lucky there. And this was also where I was living when I realized that I wanted to follow in the footsteps of Lee Weimers. As most of you know, Lee was a columnist at the Mercury News for 40 years, and I was actually his editor when he decided to retire in 2005. So I was very fortunate to be selected to succeed him, and I think I've not done too bad of a job in that role. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of stories about my job and what I do. I give that speech to other Rotary clubs, so you can watch for that at some point. But, wrapping up the personal life kind of, Amy and I were living here when we got engaged in Santa Barbara in 2005, when we got married in downtown San Jose the following summer. And then a month later, because he needs to be mentioned, we added to our family with a little dog named Chicken Bone. And we would walk him in St. James Park, and that was always an adventure. Now, living in a condo complex was also an adventure, and by 2007, we were kind of tired of that and thought, we're going to want a bigger space eventually. So we packed up and bought this 1916 arts and crafts bungalow on North 14th Street, just about a half a block from San Jose Hospital, where I was born. So it's like coming back home. It had high cove ceilings, those great double hung windows, hardwood floors, a shady pepper tree in the backyard. One drawback, it only had one closet in the entire house. We didn't know that when we bought it. But a funny story about this house is that I almost lived here in 1998. It belonged at the time to a man named Roger Kendall, who was a copy editor at the sports department of the Mercury News. And he was moving to China for some reason and wanted to rent out his house. And he knew I was looking for a place downtown, so he asked me, hey, do you want to rent the house? And I thought 2-bedroom house is too big for me, especially with the rent. And I was done with roommates at the time, so I said no. it's fine. He ended up moving and renting it to some of my other Mercury News colleagues, including the now retired Joe Rodriguez, who eventually came to a party at my house and said, hey, I used to live here. So that was kind of a serendipity. Now, Roger sold the house to a young couple who had twins, and they decided they needed more space and wanted to cut their commute to their jobs in the East Bay. So I was at a Rotary meeting sitting about there when our real estate agent emailed me to say, hey, there's this house on 14th Street you should go take a look at. So right after the meeting, I drove over there, and then I called Amy and I said, we should look at this house. And we called our agent. He got us in the next day. They were having an open house that weekend, but he got us in on Thursday, where we just visited there with, the wife was home with her 2 kids and their dogs, and it was crazy. And that night, we wrote an offer. And on Friday, they accepted our offer and they canceled their open house. And the wife told us that she and her husband had actually bought the house from Roger the exact same way. They showed up before the open house and he sold it to them. So she thought, this is destiny. You guys should get this house. So this is the house that we brought home our daughter Mia in 2009, followed by her brother Alex in 2011. I watched San Jose Hospital get torn down while Mia was sleeping. And by 2017, though, it was getting tight there. We had 2 growing kids, and we needed a bigger spot. So we sold the house and then started looking for another house, because that's how San Jose real estate works. Sell your house first. And then Chicken Bone died that June, and some of you have heard that story that I've told here. So that kind of made us ready to leave, and let's get on to the next house. Unfortunately, we found our way here to this 2-story 1942 farmhouse in Medley Park. It's got a really cool Dutch door and a staircase that's just made for a prom night photo. Now, I like knowing some things about the houses that we live in, and this one had some interesting owners, including members of the Driscoll family, who, their names are on all those plastic berry containers that you try to recycle. And the swimming pool was installed in 1971, the time I was born, by the guy who owned it then, named James Klisch. And if that name sounds familiar, that's because his daughter, Sarah Klisch, is one of our members, and she grew up in the same room that our son Alex now lives in. So, San Jose, small town. So now this is our home, where we have a new dog, Parker, known throughout the neighborhood as Parker the Barker. And it's where Amy and the kids happily endured a 25-movie James Bond marathon during the pandemic. So, to finish my promise to Alex, we're going to get into the Bond thing. I've been a James Bond fan since 1982. That makes me a Roger Moore guy at heart. I like Sean Connery, I like Daniel Craig, but I'm a Roger Moore guy. I've seen all the movies countless times, and I have multiple copies of each of Ian Fleming's books. And I was drinking Vesper martinis before Daniel Craig made that fashionable. If I started down the road to what appeals to me about the Bond movies and characters, we would just be here all day. So let's just say I'm a fan of really good cocktails, stylish tuxedos, and Aston Martins. And, to the point of being here, this is where Steve Borkenhagen and the nominating committee knocked on my door 18 months ago and offered me the opportunity to help my community as your president for the coming year. So as I have just a couple of minutes left, because we're not going to take questions, so I want to close by talking about one more thing, really quickly, which is why I'm a Rotarian. Not why I became a Rotarian. That's an easy one. I became a Rotarian because Lee Weimers told me I was going to become a Rotarian. And I honestly, I didn't know much about Rotary at the time, and I don't really think it's very important about why any of us became Rotarians. I think what's important is why we're still Rotarians. Did you know that Rotary has a vision statement? I didn't know that, but I've been getting a lot of Rotary information lately. And this one's kind of sinking in for me, so I want to read it to you. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. And to me, that says it all. Rotary isn't a cult. It's not a religion. It's not a leadership program. It's not Toastmasters. More than ever these days, I really appreciate being able to see all of you on Wednesdays because I'm learning about the value of in-person collaboration a lot now. But, you know, Wednesdays also aren't the be-all, end-all of Rotary. That's just the cherry on the sundae. That's not why we're here. It's the connective tissue of our Rotary lives, but it's not why we're Rotarians. We're Rotarians because we want to be part of something that makes our community a better place to live, something that creates lasting change in our communities and in ourselves. So I'm looking forward to being your Rotary president in July, and we can create that lasting change together. Thank you. San Jose. Where's our city? Oh, it's not up there.
Sal Pizarro, good choice, board. Sal, I do have a news flash for you, though. Based on what you had said to Amy, you were volunteering at an old folks' home on Wednesdays. I'm going to say that one again. Sal was volunteering at an old folks' home on Wednesdays. I guess twice is enough. Also, I've got one other news flash. Steve Prouty, did you know Sean O'Kane is your fourth cousin? Where is Steve? This is true. Sean O'Kane is Steve Prouty's fourth cousin. That's for real. Julia Casanova Moore. Julia, are you back there somewhere? Come on up for a second. So Julia, in 2019-20, was our outbound exchange student. And she's also helping in the office on Wednesdays during her college break. And I just want Julia to tell you for 1 minute about herself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Julia Casanova Moore. I was Rotary's youth ambassador, Rotary Youth Ambassador for the 2019-2020 year, and they sponsored me for a year abroad to study in Spain, more specifically Logroño, La Rioja. There, I spent a year going to school during my junior year of high school. It was going to school and also participating in Rotary programs. And also helping to improve my Spanish. I'm very grateful to Rotary for the opportunity and hope to continue to stay involved with the club throughout the summer and through the next couple of years. Thank you for hosting me. I look forward to meeting everybody.
Just a reminder, every Thursday, Urban Vibrancy is hosting music in a bunch of bars and restaurants downtown. Please support them. Very generous on their part. When we were selecting Sal to be president, I must admit I was lobbying for Sal, and one of the reasons was I knew I was going to have to spend lots of time with the incoming president over the next year, and I'm a huge fan of Sal Pizarro, and he certainly didn't disappoint me, and I know he won't disappoint all of you. That being said, next week our speaker is Milan Ballantyne, speaking on Juneteenth, and I forgot to mention, Sal, in your name, we will be making a donation to San Jose Jazz and History San Jose. I know two of Sal's favorite organizations. And with that, meeting adjourned. See you next week.